There's something happening within the Jehovah's Witness organization that defies conventional understanding of institutional control. For decades, this religious organization built what many consider the most comprehensive control system in modern religious history. Every aspect of member behavior was regulated, monitored, and managed through an intricate network of rules, oversight, and social pressure. Yet today, this very system of total control has become the source of the organization's most significant challenges. What we're witnessing isn't the result of external attacks or apostolic opposition. It's something far more fascinating and unprecedented. The organization's own control mechanisms have evolved beyond their original parameters and now operate in ways that actively undermine the institution they were designed to protect. This isn't about disgruntled former members or investigative journalists exposing secrets. This is about a system that has developed what can only be described as organizational contradictions so profound that they challenge the very foundations of institutional control theory. Consider the fundamental paradox at the heart of this phenomenon. The Watchtower organization designed their system to maintain absolute doctrinal purity and member compliance. Every rule, every procedure, every organizational structure was engineered to prevent deviation from established teachings and to ensure unwavering loyalty from adherents. The brilliance of the system lay in its comprehensiveness. Nothing was left to chance. Members knew exactly what to believe, how to behave, whom to associate with, and how to think about virtually every aspect of human existence. But something unexpected happened in the implementation of this total control system. The very mechanisms designed to preserve organizational stability began generating the opposite effect. The more control the organization exerted, the more situations arose that exposed internal contradictions. The tighter they gripped, the more problems slipped through their fingers. What we're observing is a textbook example of what organizational psychologists call the control paradox, but manifesting on a scale and with an intensity rarely documented in institutional studies. The first manifestation of this paradox appears in the organization's approach to information control. The Watchtower leadership recognized early that controlling information flow was essential to maintaining doctrinal authority. They established strict guidelines about what literature members could read, what websites they could visit, and what sources of information were considered reliable. Only organization-approved materials were deemed safe for consumption. This created what appeared to be an impenetrable information bubble around their membership. However, the digital age introduced variables that the original control architects never anticipated. The same technology that the organization eventually embraced for their own publishing and communication purposes also provided members with unprecedented access to historical documents, academic research, and comparative analysis. The organization found itself in an impossible position. They needed to utilize modern communication technology to remain relevant and effective, but that same technology gave members access to information that revealed inconsistencies in organizational teachings and practices. More significantly, the organization's own publications became the source of their credibility problems. The comprehensive record-keeping that was intended to demonstrate their reliability and consistency instead created a digital paper trail that documented decades of doctrinal changes, failed predictions, and revised explanations. Members didn't need external critics to point out these contradictions. They could simply compare the organization's current teachings with their own historical publications using the Watchtower's online library system. The second major manifestation involves the organization's judicial system, designed to maintain moral and spiritual purity within the congregation. This elaborate network of judicial committees, appeals processes, and disciplinary actions was created to swiftly identify and address any deviation from organizational standards. The system was intended to protect the organization from internal corruption and to maintain the high moral standards that distinguish Jehovah's Witnesses from other religious groups. Yet, this judicial system has evolved into what can only be described as an organizational liability. The very thoroughness that was supposed to ensure justice has instead created a bureaucracy so complex that it generates more problems than it solves. Cases that should be straightforward require multiple committees, extensive documentation, and lengthy appeals processes. The system designed to maintain unity has become a source of division, as different congregations interpret and apply policies differently, leading to inconsistent outcomes for similar situations. Even more problematic, the judicial system's emphasis on documentation and procedure has created legal vulnerabilities that the organization never anticipated. The detailed records maintained by judicial committees, while intended to ensure accountability and consistency, have become evidence in legal proceedings that the organization cannot control or suppress. Their own meticulous record-keeping system now works against them in courtrooms around the world. The third manifestation centers on the organization's hierarchical authority structure. The governing body was established as the ultimate earthly authority, with their decisions flowing down through circuit overseers, district overseers, elders, and ministerial servants to the general membership. This top-down command structure was designed to ensure uniform teaching and practice across all congregations worldwide. Every member knew exactly where authority resided and how decisions were made. But this rigid hierarchy has developed what can only be called institutional arthritis. The system that was meant to enable rapid response to changing circumstances has instead created bureaucratic paralysis. Simple decisions require approval from multiple levels of authority, causing delays that often make the eventual decision irrelevant. More critically, the hierarchy has become so insulated from grassroots reality that leadership decisions often clash with practical implementation needs at the congregation level. The authority structure has also created what organizational theorists call the information filtering problem. As information travels up the hierarchy, each level filters out details that might reflect poorly on their management or that contradict leadership expectations. By the time information reaches decision makers at the top, it has been sanitized to the point where leadership operates with a fundamentally distorted understanding of actual conditions within their organization. Perhaps most significantly, the hierarchical system has generated its own internal contradictions regarding spiritual authority. The organization teaches that members should rely on their Bible-trained conscience in making personal decisions, while simultaneously maintaining that organizational direction supersedes individual judgment. This creates impossible situations where members are held responsible for decisions they're not allowed to make independently, and criticized for blind obedience to the same authority structure they're taught to follow without question. The fourth manifestation involves the organization's approach to external relationships and reputation management. The Watchtower leadership invested enormous resources in controlling how their organization is perceived by both members and the general public. They developed sophisticated public relations strategies, legal departments, and communication protocols designed to present a consistent, positive image of their organization to the outside world. However, their efforts to control external perception have created what communication specialists call the credibility gap. The more energy they invest in managing their image, the more obvious it becomes that there's a disconnect between their public presentation and internal reality. Their defensive responses to criticism often generate more attention to the issues they're trying to suppress. Their legal strategies, while sometimes successful in court, often create public relations disasters that damage their reputation more than the original allegations. The organization's attempt to control information about internal problems has been particularly counterproductive in the Internet age. Their efforts to suppress unfavorable coverage through legal action or organizational pressure have instead amplified the visibility of these issues through what's known as the Streisand effect. Stories that might have remained obscure become widely distributed precisely because of attempts to suppress them. The fifth manifestation relates to the organization's doctrinal development and teaching methodology. The Watchtower organization prided itself on providing members with clear, consistent, Bible-based teachings that answered life's fundamental questions. Their publications were carefully crafted to present doctrine as unchanging truth revealed through careful Bible study and divine guidance. Yet this commitment to doctrinal certainty has created what theologians call the infallibility trap. Because the organization presented their teachings as divinely revealed truth rather than human interpretation, they cannot easily adapt to new information or changing circumstances without undermining their own authority. Each doctrinal revision raises questions about the reliability of current teachings and the competence of leadership that previously taught something different with equal confidence. The organization's solution to this dilemma has been to develop increasingly complex explanations for doctrinal changes that often create more questions than they answer. Members are expected to accept that previous understanding was incomplete rather than incorrect, while simultaneously maintaining absolute confidence in current understanding. This requires a level of cognitive flexibility that many sincere believers find difficult to sustain. The cumulative effect of these manifestations has created what can only be described as systemic institutional stress. The organization finds itself simultaneously more controlled and less controllable than ever before. Their systems have become so complex and comprehensive that they generate unexpected interactions and unintended consequences that no amount of additional control can address. What makes this situation particularly fascinating from an organizational analysis perspective is that these problems aren't the result of external opposition or internal rebellion. They're the natural consequence of a control system that has evolved beyond its original design parameters. The organization has created what systems theorists call an overdetermined system, where multiple control mechanisms interact in ways that produce outcomes nobody intended or desired. The leadership appears to recognize that their traditional solutions are no longer effective, but they cannot abandon their control systems without undermining the very foundation of their authority. They cannot admit that their systems are generating problems without calling into question the divine guidance they claim directs their organizational decisions. They're trapped by their own success in creating a system that appeared perfect but has proven to be unsustainable. This creates a unique situation in modern organizational history. We're witnessing a religious institution that has achieved total control over its membership, while simultaneously losing control over the consequences of that control. The system continues to function, but it now functions in ways that work against its original objectives. Members remain largely compliant, but their compliance creates new problems faster than the organization can solve them. The implications extend far beyond this single organization. What we're observing provides insights into the fundamental limitations of institutional control in complex modern environments. The Jehovah's Witness organization represents an extreme case study in what happens when control systems become ends in themselves rather than means to achieve organizational objectives. The organization's predicament demonstrates that total control isn't just impractical in modern society, it's actually counterproductive. The energy required to maintain comprehensive control systems eventually exceeds the benefits they provide, while generating new categories of problems that require even more control to manage. It's a dynamic that organizational theorists have predicted theoretically but rarely observed at this scale in real-world conditions. What makes this case study particularly valuable is that the organization's problems aren't the result of poor execution or inadequate resources. They had decades to perfect their systems, unlimited dedication from their membership, and sufficient financial resources to implement any control mechanism they deemed necessary. Their failure isn't due to external constraints or internal incompetence. It's the inevitable result of pursuing total control in a complex adaptive environment. The organization now faces choices that would have been inconceivable to their founders. They can maintain their control systems and accept the continuing deterioration of their effectiveness, or they can begin dismantling the very mechanisms that define their institutional identity. Either choice represents a fundamental transformation of their organizational character. This transformation is happening regardless of leadership decisions. The system itself has become the primary agent of change within the organization. The control mechanisms continue operating according to their original programming, but the environment in which they operate has changed so dramatically that their effects have become reversed. What once preserved the organization now threatens it. What once unified members now divides them. What once demonstrated their divine authority now questions it. The ultimate irony is that the organization's pursuit of perfect control has created a situation where they have less control than if they had never attempted total institutional dominance. Their comprehensive systems have made them less adaptive, less responsive, and less resilient than organizations with more flexible approaches to authority and decision-making. In seeking to control everything, they have lost the ability to control anything effectively. This represents more than just an organizational failure. It's a demonstration of fundamental principles about the relationship between control and sustainability in complex social systems. The Jehovah's Witness organization has inadvertently provided researchers with a decades-long experiment in the ultimate consequences of pursuing total institutional control. The results suggest that such control isn't just difficult to maintain, but actively self-destructive when implemented comprehensively. The question now isn't whether the organization will change, but how quickly and in what direction. The systems they created have developed their own momentum and their own logic that operates independently of human direction. The organization that sought to control every aspect of their environment has become controlled by the very mechanisms they created for that purpose. They have achieved total control, and in doing so, have lost control entirely.